My mother-in-law framed me while I was pregnant. Years later she confessed, and I chose peace by force and legal action. My name is Margaret, and I learned the hard way that you can move to a new city for love and still end up feeling like a guest in your own life. The day I realized it, I was standing in a hallway that smelled like lemon cleaner and someone else's perfume, listening to the soft click of a bedroom door closing, his mother's door. Like it was a reminder that the house belonged to her spirit more than to either of us. I didn't see it as a warning at first. I saw it as family. I saw it as a tight bond between mother and son that would eventually make room for me. I told myself that love could stretch, that it could widen like a warm blanket pulled over 3 shoulders instead of 2. I told myself I didn't have to compete with her. I wasn't trying to replace her. I was only trying to build something new with the man I'd chosen. When I packed my car to leave my hometown, I packed optimism the way people pack winter coats, thinking it might be too much, but bringing it anyway just in case. I brought my favorite mug with the chipped rim, the one my best friend had painted with little moons. I brought my old quilt. I brought the framed photo of my dad and me at a county fair when I was 12, both of us squinting into sunlight and laughing, cotton candy stuck in our teeth. I brought the belief that adulthood was something you earned through trying, that if you tried hard enough, you could make a life work. I was wrong about at least one of those things. The city we moved to was larger than mine, louder, always in motion. On the first day, as I drove in with the window cracked and the GPS voice calmly saying, "Keep left," I felt that specific kind of excitement you only get when you're starting over and everything is still possible. The skyline looked like clean lines drawn against a bright sky. Streets were lined with young trees held up by stakes, like they were still learning how to stand. People walked dogs in neat little harnesses. Coffee shops had chalkboard menus that always included something with lavender. Joseph met me outside the apartment building with his arms open and his smile wide, and for a moment I felt like I'd been right. Like love was enough. He kissed my forehead, and I smelled detergent on his shirt. He took the heavier boxes without being asked. He pointed out the best place for morning light in the living room. He showed me a tiny balcony that faced a courtyard with a fountain that was more decorative than functional, but still made a pleasant sound if you opened the door. "This is ours," he said, like he was claiming it, and I believed him. His mother, Mildred, arrived before we even finished unpacking. I still remember the way she knocked, not the polite little tap of someone checking if it's a good time, but the confident knock of someone who knows she is always welcome. Knock, knock, knock. A pause. Knock, knock. As if she was announcing herself, not asking permission. Joseph looked almost relieved. He wiped his hands on his jeans and went to open the door like a boy who had been expecting her all along. "Hi, sweetheart," she sang, stepping in as if the hallway belonged to her too. She wore a pale pink blouse and pearl earrings, and she smelled like expensive lotion. She kissed Joseph on both cheeks, then turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So you're Margaret," she said, as if my name was something she was tasting, rolling around on her tongue. "Well, aren't you, petite?" It was such an odd first observation that I laughed, thinking she was making an awkward compliment. "I guess," I said. "It's nice to finally meet you in person." "Oh, we've met," she said lightly. "I've seen you on video calls. I just mean in the flesh. It's different. Everything is different in person." She set down the bag she'd brought, something from a boutique, the kind of bag that was thick paper with tissues spilling out, and immediately started scanning the apartment, her gaze landing on each wall as if she was measuring it. "You'll want curtains," she said. "Those blinds are cheap. Cheap blinds make a place feel temporary." Joseph chuckled. "Mom, we literally just moved in. And that's why I'm here," she said briskly. "To make sure you do this right." She unpacked her bag and pulled out a set of hand towels embroidered with little wreaths, even though it wasn't the season for wreaths. She handed them to me like a test. "These will look better in your bathroom," she said. "The white ones you have will get dingy." I hadn't bought white towels. I didn't even own white towels. But I smiled anyway, because first impressions mattered, and I was determined to be kind. Over the next few weeks, Mildred came often. Sometimes she texted Joseph first, but most of the time she didn't. Sometimes I'd come home from my new job, an administrative role at a small design firm, and find her sitting at our kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't know we owned, talking to Joseph about his finances like it was still her business. I'd stand in the doorway with my bag on my shoulder and watch them, Joseph leaning his elbows on the table, his expression attentive, Mildred gesturing with manicured fingers, telling him what he should do, what he should avoid, what he owed. The way she spoke had the cadence of a person delivering a lecture. There was always a moral in it. There was always a warning. Sometimes she'd look at me as if I had appeared from nowhere. "Oh, you're home," she'd say. "Good. I was just telling Joseph he needs to start putting more into savings. In this economy, you just never know." I would nod and go wash my hands, because what else could I do? It felt too early to argue. Too early to be the difficult one. At night, when it was just Joseph and me, I tried to bring it up gently. "I love that you're close with your mom," I'd say, keeping my voice calm, like it mattered. "But sometimes it feels like she's here a lot." Joseph would sigh and pull me closer. "She's lonely," he'd say. "She worries. She's always been like this. Could we set boundaries?" I'd ask. He'd kiss my hair like a distraction. "We will. Eventually. Let's just get settled first." Eventually became a word I learned to distrust. The first real fracture happened over money, though the surface of it looked harmless at first. It started with little things, Joseph paying for Mildred's phone bill, just this month, because she'd had some surprise expenses. Joseph covering her car repair. Joseph transferring money to her because she'd miscalculated her credit card payment. I didn't mind helping family. I truly didn't. I was raised to believe you show up for the people you love. My mother was the kind of woman who would bring soup to a neighbor with a cold without being asked. My father fixed things for strangers because he couldn't stand the idea of someone struggling. But Mildred didn't look like she was struggling. Mildred wore new shoes, carried new handbags, talked about salon appointments as if they were necessities. Mildred had opinions about wine pairings. Mildred went to brunch. One evening I opened the mail and saw a credit card statement addressed to Joseph, and because we were building a life together, because we shared expenses, because that's what couples did, I looked at it. The balance made my stomach tighten. There were charges I didn't recognize. There was a boutique I'd never heard of. There was a spa. There were restaurant tabs that looked like parties, not meals. When Joseph came home, I set the statement on the counter like a quiet question. "Hey," I said, "can we talk about this?" He glanced at it and his face shifted, the smallest flinch, the quickest denial. "Oh, that? Is that your mom?" I asked, because I already knew. He rubbed the back of his neck. "She needed help." "Joseph, this is a lot." "She's paying me back," he said quickly. "She said she would." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam anything. I just felt something settle in my chest, heavy and cold. "When?" He hesitated. "Soon." "Is she using your card?" I asked. He looked away. It was easier. I stared at him, trying to understand how a grown man could say that with a straight face. Easier for who? Easier for her to keep living the way she wanted? Easier for him to avoid conflict? Easier for both of them to pretend her wants were needs? I inhaled slowly, like I was trying to calm an animal inside me. "We're trying to build our future," I said. "We have rent. We have bills. We're talking about." I stopped, because at that time, we weren't talking about babies yet. But I'd been thinking about it. Quietly. Hopefully. Joseph's jaw tightened. "You don't understand," he said. "Then explain it," I replied. He exhaled sharply. "She's my mom. She sacrificed for me. She's alone. She doesn't have anyone else." I thought of my own mother, who had been alone after my father died, and yet had never once asked me to fund a lifestyle she couldn't afford. I thought of the difference between need and entitlement. "I'm not saying we can't help her," I said carefully. "I'm saying we can't do this. Not like this." That night, when Mildred came by unannounced as usual, Joseph didn't stop her. She walked in with a bag of groceries like she lived there and started rearranging things in our refrigerator. "Oh, Margaret," she said, not turning around, "you shouldn't put the eggs there. The door is too warm." I watched her move my food around. I watched her take control of a space that was supposed to be mine too. And something in me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively, like a thread breaking. Mildred, I said, we need to talk. She paused, still holding a carton of eggs, and turned with a pleasant expression, as if she was always ready for conversation. Of course, she said. What is it, dear? I pointed to the counter where the credit card statement still sat like evidence. I saw the balance. I saw the charges. Mildred's face didn't change. Not even a flicker. Oh, she said. That's all. That's all. I repeated, surprised by my own voice, which sounded too calm. She set the eggs down carefully. Joseph told you? I found the statement, I said. Joseph said you needed help. Mildred smiled faintly. I did. I do. Life is expensive. Those charges don't look like emergencies, I said. They look like... She lifted a hand, cutting me off. I don't like being judged in my son's home, she said. In my son's home. Not her home. Not Joseph and Margaret's home. Her son's. Joseph stood between us like a nervous referee. Mom, he murmured, maybe just. Mildred turned to him immediately, her gaze softening. Sweetheart, she said, I didn't come here to be interrogated. I felt heat behind my eyes, but I refused to cry. We can't keep paying for things we can't afford, I said. We need boundaries. Mildred's smile cooled. Boundaries, she repeated, as if it was a dirty word. Then she looked at Joseph. Is this what you've chosen? A woman who counts your pennies and tells you how to treat your mother. Joseph's face flushed. Margaret's not. Oh, she is, Mildred said smoothly. I can hear it in her voice. I can see it in her eyes. I took a step forward. I'm not trying to control you, I said to Joseph, forcing myself to speak to him, not to her. I'm trying to build a life with you. Mildred's mouth tightened. And what about the life he already has? What about the family he already belongs to? Something about the way she said belongs to made me feel like I was trespassing. A month later, I found out I was pregnant. It happened on a quiet morning, the kind of morning that feels like nothing special until it becomes a marker you measure your life against. I'd been tired for days, unusually tired, like my bones had been filled with sand. I'd been nauseous in the mornings. I'd blame stress, the move, the new job. But when I stood in the bathroom and watched the test change, watched the lines appear, my knees went soft. I sat on the closed toilet lid and pressed my hand to my mouth. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not because I was panicking. Because the feeling was too big. A swelling of hope and fear and disbelief all at once. When Joseph came out of the shower, hair wet, towel around his waist, I held the test out like a secret. He stared at it, then at me. His face broke into a smile so bright it made me laugh through sudden tears. Are you serious? He whispered. I nodded. He crossed the small bathroom in 2 steps and lifted me off the floor, spinning me once. Oh my God, he said into my hair. We're going to have a baby. For 2 days, it was ours. Just ours. A little bubble of joy. Then we told Mildred. We drove to her condo because she insisted that news like this should be shared properly. She made a show of laying out tea and little pastries, as if she'd been expecting us. When Joseph announced it, her reaction was theatrical. She pressed a hand to her chest. She gasped. She stood and hugged Joseph tightly. My baby having a baby, she said. Then she turned and hugged me too, but her arms were stiff, her cheek barely touching mine. I smelled her perfume and thought, irrationally, that my child would always remember this scent. How far along? She asked. About 6 weeks, I said. She pursed her lips. So early, she murmured. It's still exciting, Joseph said, laughing. It is, Mildred agreed, but her eyes stayed on me like she was calculating something. We'll need to make sure you do everything correctly. I tried to smile. I'm taking prenatal vitamins. I have an appointment scheduled. Good, she said. And you'll need to think about childcare. And the name. And of course, Joseph, you'll need to make sure you have enough saved. Babies are expensive. Joseph nodded, eager. We're budgeting. Mildred's gaze sharpened. Oh, she said. Budgeting. I knew what she was thinking, and I hated that I knew. As my belly began to show, the money situation got worse. It was as if my pregnancy triggered something in Mildred, like she could sense her influence shifting, her son's attention pulling toward a new life that did not revolve around her. She began calling more. She began dropping by more. She began manufacturing crises. There was always something wrong. Always something that required Joseph's help. A leak. A payment. A neighbor being rude. A pharmacy mixing up her prescription. A strange noise in her car. She cried sometimes, her voice shaking, and Joseph would react the way he always did, with quick concern and immediate action. Meanwhile, I started to see how fragile our finances really were. We weren't drowning, but we were wading in deeper water than Joseph admitted. When I suggested we cut back, fewer takeout meals, fewer subscriptions, fewer unnecessary purchases, Joseph agreed in theory, but then Mildred would call, and the plan would dissolve. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, spreadsheets on the screen, and I watched Joseph transfer money to his mother again. "That's the third time this month," I said quietly. He didn't look up. "She needed it." "For what?" I asked. He sighed. "Her condo fees went up." "Joseph," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we need to think about the baby." His eyes flashed with irritation. "I am thinking about the baby. That's why I'm keeping things calm. That's why I don't want stress in the house." The words stung because they implied that I was the stress. I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling the subtle curve, the life growing, and I tried to speak from that place, protective, careful, determined. "Keeping things calm doesn't mean ignoring reality," I said. "We can't support two households like this." Joseph's shoulders sagged. "It's temporary." "You've been saying that for months," I replied. He looked at me then, truly looked, and for the first time in our relationship, I saw resentment in his eyes. Not anger exactly. Something quieter, more dangerous. The feeling that I was threatening the balance he'd spent his whole life maintaining. "My mom is not your enemy," he said. I swallowed. "I don't want her to be. But she's acting like I am." 2 days later, Mildred called Joseph while he was at work, and when he came home, his face was tight, his movements abrupt. "We need to talk," he said. My stomach dropped because the tone was wrong. "Okay," I said cautiously. "What's going on?" He stared at me as if he was trying to see through my skin. "Where were you today?" he asked. "At work," I said. "Then I went to the grocery store." He nodded slowly, like he was filing it away. "And after that?" I blinked. "Home. I'm home." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His hand was shaking just slightly. He unlocked it and held it out toward me. On the screen was a photo. A grainy photo, taken from far away. It showed a woman who looked like me from the back, same hair length, same posture, standing near a man outside a cafe. The angle made it look intimate, like they were close. Like they were touching. Like it meant something. For a second, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I did, and my throat tightened. "What is this?" I asked. Joseph's voice was low. "You tell me." I stared at the photo. The woman's face wasn't visible. The man's face was partially turned away. It could have been anyone. It could have been nothing. "I don't know who that is," I said, because I didn't. Joseph's eyes narrowed. "My mom said she saw you." My heartbeat became loud in my ears. "Your mom," I repeated. He looked away briefly, as if ashamed but committed. "She said she didn't want to believe it," he said. "She said she tried to ignore it. But then she took the picture because she knew I'd need proof." Proof. The word hit me like a slap. "Joseph," I said, my voice trembling now despite my effort, "I have not cheated on you. I'm pregnant. I'm exhausted. I go to work and come home. This is insane." He held the phone tighter. "Then explain the picture." "It's not me," I said. "Or if it looks like me, it's someone else. You can't even see her face." Joseph's jaw clenched. "My mom doesn't lie." A cold wave washed over me. Not fear of losing him, not exactly. It was the realization that I had been building a life with someone whose loyalty was not to me, not to the family we were creating, but to the person who had raised him to believe she was the center of everything. "Your mom has been trying to push me out since we moved here," I said softly. "And now you're letting her." His eyes flashed again. "Don't make this about her." "It is about her," I insisted. "Because she's the one who brought this to you." She's the one who wants you to believe it. Joseph's face hardened. Maybe she wants to protect me. I felt tears gather, but I blinked them back. From what? I asked. From your pregnant wife? He didn't answer. He just stared at me as if I was a stranger. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because Joseph told me to. Because I couldn't lie next to him and feel his suspicion like a weight between us. In the morning, I went to my doctor's appointment alone. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. The waiting room was full of women holding their bellies, couples with their hands intertwined, soft murmurs of excitement and nerves. I sat by myself, hands folded in my lap, and tried not to cry. When the nurse called my name, I followed her down the hallway and listened to the sound of my own footsteps, steady and hollow. The ultrasound tech was kind. She smiled and asked how I was feeling. I said, tired, because it was safer than telling the truth. When she turned the screen toward me, I saw the small shape of my baby, and I felt something inside me soften and strengthen at the same time. There was life. There was possibility. There was something real, something no one could stage with a photo. I left the appointment with a printout tucked carefully in my bag, like a fragile promise. When I drove back to the apartment, the sky was gray, heavy with the threat of rain. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly. I rehearsed what I would say to Joseph. I would show him the ultrasound. I would remind him that this was our child. I would tell him we needed counseling. We needed boundaries. We needed to stop letting Mildred into our home like she owned it. I pulled into the parking lot and noticed something odd immediately. The space near our building was crowded, as if something had spilled out onto the sidewalk. I got out of my car and heard voices, neighbors, murmuring, curious. Then I saw my things. My quilt. My boxes. My framed photo of my dad. My lamp with the dented shade. Piled on the street like garbage. For a moment, my brain refused to make sense of it. I stood there, staring, as if I could force reality to rearrange itself. Then I ran. I ran to the front door of the building and pushed it open, my breath sharp, my heart pounding. I went up the stairs, taking them too fast, one hand on the railing, the other pressed against my belly. I reached our door and tried my key. It didn't work. I tried again, harder, as if force could solve it. Still nothing. I stared at the lock. It looked the same, but it wasn't. The metal was new. The keyhole was different. My mouth went dry. No, I whispered. I knocked, then pounded, panic rising. Joseph! I shouted, my voice cracking. Joseph, open the door. No answer. I banged again. My palm hurt. Joseph! Please! A neighbor cracked her door open down the hall, her face cautious. Margaret, she asked. Are you okay? I turned, tears spilling now. He changed the locks, I said, as if saying it out loud would make it impossible. The neighbor's eyes widened. Oh, honey. I ran back down the stairs, stumbling, and went outside to the pile of my life. Rain began to spit from the sky, small, cold drops that darkened the cardboard boxes. I sank to my knees on the sidewalk, not caring who saw me, and I pressed my hands to my stomach, feeling the baby move faintly, as if reacting to my distress. My phone shook in my hand as I called Joseph. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I called Mildred because the truth was already clawing its way into the open. She answered on the second ring, her voice sweet. Hello, dear. What did you do? I demanded, my voice ragged. There was a pause, then a small sigh as if she was bored. Joseph told you, she said. Told me what? I cried. That he threw me out? That he changed the locks? That he left his pregnant wife on the street? He made a choice, Mildred said calmly. A necessary one. This is illegal, I said. This is. You should have thought about consequences, she replied. I stared at the wet boxes, my belongings exposed, my life overturned. You lied, I whispered. You lied to him. Mildred's voice sharpened. I protected my son, she said. You were never right for him. I felt dizzy. He believed you, I said. Of course he did, she said, like it was obvious. He knows me. The line went dead. I sat there in the rain until my neighbor came down with an umbrella and helped me gather my things. She let me sit in her apartment for a while, gave me tea, offered me a blanket. I barely heard her words. My mind was stuck on one image, Joseph's face, the way he had looked at that staged photo like it was truth, the way he had said, "My mom doesn't lie." I called my mother next. When she answered, I tried to speak, but the sound that came out was raw. "Mom," I sobbed. She didn't ask questions first. She didn't hesitate. "Where are you?" she said. "On the sidewalk," I whispered. "I'm coming," she said. "I'm coming right now." My mother arrived before nightfall. She stepped out of her car with her hair pulled back, her face set in that fierce expression I'd only seen when someone threatened her family. She wrapped her arms around me and held me as if she could glue me back together. "We're leaving," she said. I looked up at the apartment building one last time, at the window that belonged to what I thought was my home. The curtains were drawn. The balcony door was closed. Inside, Joseph was somewhere, living the life he had chosen. A life where his mother's lies mattered more than my truth. We drove away with my boxes in the trunk and my heart in pieces. My mother urged me to call the police, but I was in shock and all I could think was getting the baby safe. I didn't hear from Joseph again before the baby was born. There were moments when I thought he might call, when I imagined his guilt finally breaking through. I pictured him standing alone in our kitchen, staring at the empty space where my mug had been, realizing what he'd done. But days turned into weeks and the silence became its own answer. My mother helped me set up a room in her house. She cleared out the old guest room, painted the walls a soft, calm color, and hung a small night light shaped like a star. I folded baby clothes with trembling hands, trying to focus on practical tasks because emotions were too big to hold all at once. At night, I lay in bed and listened to the house settle, small creaks, distant traffic, the hum of the refrigerator, and I replayed everything, searching for the moment I could have changed the outcome. There was none. Not really. Because the truth was simple. Joseph had been trained his entire life to choose Mildred, and I had underestimated how deep that training went. When the labor started, my mother drove me to the hospital. The air outside was crisp, and the sky was pale, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to be day or night. I breathed through contractions in the car, my mother's hand gripping mine so tightly my fingers went numb. In the delivery room, as I labored, as my body worked through pain that felt ancient and consuming, I kept thinking of Joseph, not because I missed him, but because I couldn't understand how someone could abandon their child before it even entered the world. My mother stayed beside me the whole time. She wiped my forehead. She whispered encouragement. She told me I was strong, that I could do this, that I wasn't alone. And when my son was born, when I heard his cry, sharp and startling and perfect, I felt something shift. His tiny body was placed on my chest, warm and slippery and real, and I looked at his face and knew, with a clarity that made me tremble, that I would spend the rest of my life protecting him. I named him Charlie. I chose the name because it sounded happy to me, like something gentle after a storm. Joseph never signed the birth certificate. He never asked for photos. He never showed up. I filed for child support eventually, because it wasn't just about money, it was about responsibility, about refusing to let Joseph erase his role. But he dodged it. He changed jobs. He avoided paperwork. He ignored notices. It was like trying to hold smoke. When I filed for support, the court required a paternity determination. Once it was established, everything became official on paper, even if he still refused to show up in real life. I learned how to be a single mother in the way you learn anything difficult, one day at a time, often exhausted, often doubting yourself, but moving forward because the alternative is unthinkable. Charlie grew into a toddler with bright eyes and a laugh that made strangers smile. He loved toy cars and bedtime stories. He loved when I traced circles on his back until he fell asleep. Sometimes he would ask about his dad in the simple way children ask questions they don't understand the weight of. "Where's my daddy?" he'd ask, looking up at me with a face so open it hurt. I would swallow and choose honesty without cruelty. "He's not here," I'd say softly. "But you have me. And you have Grandma. And you are loved." And he was. So deeply. So steadily. Years passed. The ache dulled. Not because I forgot, but because my life filled up with new routines, new joys, new quiet victories. I finished a certification program and got a better job. I saved money. I moved into a small apartment of my own, then later into a little house with a backyard where Charlie could run. I learned to trust myself again. I learned that betrayal could crack you open, but not necessarily destroy you. And then, when Charlie was 5, I met someone who changed the tone of my life. His name was Daniel. I met him in a way that felt almost boring at the time, at a weekend community event, where local vendors sold crafts and kids ran through a bounce house. I was standing in line for lemonade, Charlie tugging at my hand, when Daniel offered to let us go ahead because he was in no rush. He had kind eyes and a quiet voice. He wasn't flashy. He didn't make me feel like I had to perform. He simply smiled at Charlie and said, "Hey buddy," as if speaking to children was normal and welcome, not an inconvenience. Charlie studied him seriously and then nodded, like he was approving. Over time, Daniel became part of our rhythm. He showed up consistently. He remembered small things, Charlie's favorite dinosaur, my preference for herbal tea, the fact that loud restaurants made me anxious. He never tried to force himself into our lives. He offered. He waited. He respected. When I told him, early on, about Joseph and Mildred, I expected the familiar tightness in my chest, the shame, the fear that my past would poison something good. But Daniel just listened. "That must have been terrifying," he said quietly. It was such a simple sentence, and yet it made my eyes burn. Because no one had said that before. People had said, "Well, at least you're free now," or "Everything happens for a reason," or "You're better off." But Daniel named it terrifying. He saw the truth of it. He didn't ask for details like gossip. He asked how it affected me now. He asked what I needed. He asked what boundaries helped me feel safe. And slowly, carefully, I let him in. Years later, Daniel adopted Charlie. It wasn't a dramatic courtroom scene with big speeches. It was a quiet, profound moment where Charlie held Daniel's hand and smiled in a way that looked like relief. Like he had finally been chosen clearly. We built a life that felt stable. We ate dinner together. We had movie nights. We had routines that were predictable in the way healing often is, steady, safe, familiar. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit on the porch and listen to the sounds of our neighborhood, sprinklers clicking on, distant laughter, wind moving through leaves, and I would think, this is peace. This is what I fought for. Then, one afternoon, when Charlie was 10, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered with caution. "Hello." There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Margaret," Joseph said. My stomach tightened as if my body remembered before my mind could catch up. I didn't speak right away. My hand gripped the phone, knuckles whitening. "Why are you calling?" I asked finally. Joseph's voice sounded older, rougher. "My mom died," he said. I didn't respond with sympathy immediately. I didn't respond with anything. My mind flashed with images, boxes in the rain, locks changed, lies whispered like poison. "I see," I said carefully. He swallowed audibly. "Before she died, she told me something," he said. I felt a cold calm spread through me. "What?" "She admitted it," he said. "She admitted she lied. About you. About the cheating. She said she made it up. She said she couldn't stand the idea of me needing anyone else." My throat tightened. Even though I'd known. Even though I'd always known. Hearing it out loud felt like the universe, finally confirming what I'd been forced to carry alone. "And now what?" I asked. Joseph's voice cracked. "I messed up," he said. "I ruined everything. And Margaret, I want to make it right. I want to meet my son." My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. "You don't have a son," I said quietly. "Not in the way you mean." "Yes, I do," Joseph insisted, desperation rising. "He's my child. I have rights." Charlie has a father," I said. "He has Daniel." There was a long silence. Then Joseph said, "I just want a chance." I thought of Charlie's face when he'd asked where his daddy was. I thought of the nights I'd held him through fevers, the mornings I'd packed lunches, the years of silence Joseph had chosen. A chance is not something you demand after a decade, I said. It's something you earn by showing up when it matters. Joseph's breathing sounded ragged. Please, he said. I can't live with this. I closed my eyes. You'll have to, I said softly. Because we already did. I hung up, hands shaking. That night, Daniel found me sitting at the kitchen table long after Charlie had gone to bed. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels full of memory. What happened? Daniel asked, his voice gentle. I told him. Daniel listened, like he always did. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. Whatever you decide, he said, we do it together. I wanted to believe the call would be the end. A ghost from the past trying to rattle the windows, then fading. But Joseph didn't fade. He started showing up in places he shouldn't have been. The first time, it was outside Charlie's school. I was there early, waiting near the pickup line, when I saw him standing across the street. He looked different, thinner, hairline receded, shoulders tense. But his eyes were the same. That intense, restless focus. For a moment, I couldn't move. My body reacted as if I was 8 months pregnant again, as if the world was about to flip. Then Joseph stepped forward, as if he belonged there. I walked quickly toward him, keeping my face controlled, my heart racing. What are you doing? I hissed. He looked at me with a strange mix of guilt and entitlement. I just want to see him, he said. No, I said firmly. You don't get to ambush my child at school. He's my son, Joseph said, voice rising. He doesn't know you, I replied. And you're scaring me. Joseph's face twisted. You're turning him against me, he accused. I almost laughed at the absurdity, but the sound would have been bitter. You did that yourself, I said. By leaving. Joseph's eyes darted toward the school doors. Is he coming out? He asked, as if I was simply withholding a package he had ordered. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. If you are here when he walks out, I will call the police, I said. Do you understand? His jaw tightened. You can't keep him from me forever. I looked him in the eye. Watch me, I said. Joseph left that day, but he didn't stop. He drove past our house slowly, like he was studying it. He left notes on the porch, short, messy handwriting on torn paper. I'm sorry. I deserve a chance. Tell Charlie I love him. Daniel installed cameras. He kept the blinds closed more often. He walked Charlie to the bus stop with a protective vigilance that made my chest ache with gratitude and fear. Charlie noticed, of course. Children always do. Why are you guys acting weird? He asked one evening, frowning. I sat beside him on the couch and took his hands gently. Someone from my past is trying to come back, I said carefully. Charlie blinked. Like a friend. I swallowed. Like someone who made choices that hurt us, I said. Charlie's brow furrowed. Did he hurt you? The question pierced me because it was so direct, so protective. I squeezed his hands. He hurt me a long time ago, I admitted. But you're safe. And Dad, Daniel, will always keep you safe too. Charlie nodded slowly, absorbing it in the way kids do, seriously, quietly. Okay, he said. I trust you. The next time Joseph showed up, it was at the grocery store. I turned down an aisle and nearly collided with him. For a second, I felt trapped, like the shelves were closing in. Margaret, Joseph said, stepping closer, too close. I backed up instinctively. You need to stop, I said. He held up his hands as if he was harmless. I'm not trying to scare you, he said. I just want to talk. There's nothing to talk about, I replied. His face contorted. I was manipulated, he said, voice shaking. You don't understand what she did to me. She controlled everything. I stared at him, and for a moment, I did understand. Mildred had shaped him, trained him, kept him tethered. But understanding didn't erase the consequences. You still chose, I said. You chose to believe her. You chose to throw me out. Joseph's eyes filled with something that looked like tears. I didn't know, he said. I didn't know. I shook my head. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. His voice rose, desperate. Just let me meet him. Please. One time. No, I said again, steady. If you keep doing this, I will get a restraining order. Joseph's expression hardened. You think a piece of paper will stop me from being a father? He snapped. That was the moment my fear turned into certainty. Because his entitlement was bigger than his remorse. His need was bigger than Charlie's safety. I walked away and called Daniel from the parking lot, my hands trembling. "We're done waiting," I said. "We're filing." The process of getting a restraining order wasn't cinematic. It was paperwork and statements and dates and sitting in a waiting room with fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly. It was telling my story to strangers who asked calm questions while I tried to keep my voice from shaking. It was showing them the camera footage of Joseph driving past our house. It was explaining why a man who hadn't wanted his child suddenly wanted access now. When the order was granted, I felt a strange mixture of relief and grief. Relief that someone official had said, "Yes, you deserve protection." Grief that it had come to this at all. Joseph violated the order within a week. He showed up at Charlie's school again. This time, the school called me before I even arrived. "There's a man here," the secretary said, voice tense. "He says he's Charlie's father." My stomach dropped. "Lock the doors," I said quickly. "Call the police." "I'm on my way." By the time I got there, officers were already speaking to Joseph near the curb. He looked furious, gesturing, arguing. I stayed in my car for a moment, breathing hard, hands on the steering wheel, trying to steady myself. Daniel sat beside me, silent but solid, his presence anchoring me. "We're okay," he said softly. I nodded, forcing myself to believe it. Joseph was arrested that day. Not because he was dramatic, not because he shouted threats, but because he wouldn't stop. Because he couldn't accept boundaries. Because he saw my life as something he could demand entry into, regardless of the harm. After repeated violations, the consequences became unavoidable. Joseph was sentenced to time in prison. When I heard the ruling, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. I felt like someone who had been holding their breath for years and finally exhaled. Still, I knew paper and prison weren't permanent shields. People got out. People held grudges. People blamed others for their own choices. So Daniel and I made the decision that felt both heartbreaking and necessary. We moved. We didn't announce it to neighbors. We didn't post about it. We quietly sold the house and packed our lives into boxes again, boxes that this time were safe inside a moving truck, not soaking in rain on a sidewalk. We moved across the country to a place where the air smelled different, where the streets were unfamiliar, where Joseph didn't know which grocery store we used or which school Charlie attended. On the first night in our new home, after Charlie had fallen asleep in his new room, Daniel and I stood in the kitchen surrounded by unopened boxes, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the empty space. I leaned my head against Daniel's shoulder and felt his arm wrap around me. "We did it," he whispered. I closed my eyes. "We did," I said. In the months that followed, peace returned slowly, like a shy animal edging back into the yard. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But steadily. Charlie made friends. He joined a soccer team. He learned the names of the streets. He stopped glancing over his shoulder when we left the house. And I began to sleep again without waking up at every sound. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I would think about Mildred's confession. I would picture her on a deathbed, finally admitting the truth. I would wonder if she felt regret, or if she simply wanted absolution. I would wonder if Joseph truly understood the damage, not just to me, but to the child he abandoned. But then I would hear Charlie laughing in the backyard, or Daniel calling us in for dinner, and the past would lose its grip. Because the truth was this: betrayal had tried to define my life, but it didn't get the final word. I did. I built a home where love wasn't conditional, where family meant safety, where my son grew up knowing he was chosen, protected, cherished. And if you're listening right now, maybe you know what it feels like to be cast out, to be blamed for someone else's cruelty, to have your world flipped over without warning. If you do, I want you to remember something I had to learn slowly. Your peace is worth fighting for, even if the fight is quiet, even if it's paperwork and boundaries and moving trucks instead of dramatic revenge. You can rebuild. You can create a life so steady and warm that the ghosts of the past can't find their way in. If this story helped you relax, if it made you feel less alone, please like and subscribe so you can keep drifting off with us at Bedtime Threads, night after night. The first few weeks after we moved felt like living inside a cardboard maze. Every room had stacks of boxes labeled in thick marker: kitchen, Charlie's books, winter clothes, important, and the word important appeared far too often, as if I'd been trying to convince myself that everything we owned still mattered after everything we'd survived. But the longer we stayed, the more the house softened around us. The echo in the hallway faded as we hung framed photos again, new ones this time, not the ones that still tasted like the past. The kitchen started to smell like dinner instead of tape and dust. Charlie's laughter began to live in the walls. Daniel's humming came from the laundry room when he folded shirts with that patient, methodical care he put into everything. And slowly, the tight coil in my chest loosened. Not all at once. Peace doesn't arrive like a parade with banners. It arrives like a dimmer switch, turning the world down from blinding to bearable. On the first Saturday, Charlie asked if we could go exploring. Exploring what? I asked, leaning against the counter while Daniel poured pancake batter into a pan. Charlie shrugged with the absolute confidence of a child who believes the world was made for discovery. The neighborhood, he said. I want to know where stuff is. I looked at Daniel. He gave me a small nod. Not permission, partnership. So we went. We walked past houses with different styles than back home, some with porches wide enough for rocking chairs, some with gardens that looked like they'd been tended lovingly for decades. A woman waved at us while trimming a hedge. A dog barked once, then wagged its tail like it had decided we were safe. There was a park a few blocks away with a wide field and a playground that smelled like sun-warmed plastic. Charlie ran toward the swings like he'd been thirsty for that kind of normal. Daniel and I sat on a bench and watched him. He pumped his legs higher and higher, and his smile was so open and bright that my eyes stung. Daniel nudged me gently with his shoulder. He's going to be okay, he murmured. I swallowed. I know, I said. It just still surprises me. Good surprises are allowed, he replied. That sentence settled into me like a blanket. For a while, we lived quietly and carefully, the way you do after a storm, grateful for every ordinary day, suspicious of any sudden noise. We changed routines. We used different routes. We kept our circle small. We didn't post our location anywhere. Daniel made sure the cameras worked, even though there was nothing to record now but squirrels and the occasional delivery truck. At night, when Charlie went to bed, Daniel and I developed a ritual we didn't even have to discuss. We would stand in the kitchen, turn off most of the lights, and drink tea while the house hummed around us. We'd talk about small things: Charlie's new teacher, the grocery store that had the best produce, which box we still couldn't find the extra phone chargers in. And sometimes, when the silence felt safe enough, we talked about the past, but only in small sips, not gulps. We didn't let it drown us. Still, the past has a way of trying the doorknob. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, months after we'd settled in, when I was folding laundry and Charlie was doing homework at the dining table, pencil tapping, his face serious with concentration. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. My stomach tightened the way it always did now whenever the world reached for me unexpectedly. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again immediately. Then again. Daniel stepped into the doorway, his brow lifting. Everything okay? He asked. I don't know, I whispered. The phone buzzed a fourth time. I answered, because sometimes avoiding something only gives it more room in your imagination. Hello. There was a pause that was too long, too heavy. Then a voice I hadn't heard in months, but one my body recognized instantly, the way skin recognizes fire. Margaret, Joseph said. For a moment, the room tilted. Not in a dramatic way, just enough to remind me that the past still knew how to knock the air out of my lungs. I didn't sit down. I didn't soften my voice. I stood there with a shirt half folded in my hands and stared at the wall like it might keep me steady. How did you get this number? I asked. Joseph exhaled shakily, like he'd been rehearsing. It doesn't matter, he said. I just need to talk. Daniel's eyes sharpened the instant he heard Joseph's name. He didn't speak, but he moved closer, close enough that his shoulder brushed mine, close enough to remind me I wasn't alone. It does matter, I said, voice steady. Because you are not supposed to contact me. I'm not near you, Joseph said quickly. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just calling. You're not allowed to, I said. He swallowed audibly. I got out, he said. as if that explained everything. The words were simple, but they landed like a stone in my stomach. You were in prison, I said, more to keep myself calm than because I didn't know. I served my time, he said, defensive now. I did what the court said. Daniel lifted his chin, eyes hard. He mouthed, hang up. I held up a finger, 1 second. What do you want, Joseph? I asked. There was a tremor in his voice that might have been regret, or might have been something else. I want to fix this, he said. I want to see Charlie. My grip tightened on the phone. No, I said, and there was no debate in it. You're not going to do that. I have rights, he said, the old entitlement creeping in like mold. No, I replied. You gave those up when you abandoned him. And you confirmed it when you violated a restraining order to stalk a child. His breathing sounded rough. I was grieving, he said. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. We were living, I said quietly. We were surviving. We were raising him. Grief doesn't give you permission to terrorize people. A sharp silence stretched between us. Then Joseph said, I know where you are. My whole body went cold. Daniel's hand closed gently around my wrist, grounding me. You don't, I said, forcing calm into my voice like pressing a lid onto boiling water. Joseph's voice lowered, intimate in the worst way. I've been looking, he said. I hired someone. I found you. Charlie's pencil stopped tapping. He looked up, sensing the shift in the room. I turned slightly so he couldn't see my face. You listen to me, I said into the phone, and my voice sharpened into something I rarely used anymore. If you come anywhere near my child, I will call the police. If you contact me again, I will report it as a violation. If you try to approach our home, we will not open the door. Do you understand? Joseph's breath hitched. I'm his father. You are his past, I said. And we are not living there anymore. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard that the phone nearly slipped. Daniel didn't ask questions. He wrapped his arm around me and held me against his chest, his heartbeat steady and slow. Charlie stared at us from the table, his eyes wide. Mom, he asked softly. Was that him? The fact that he said him instead of my dad told me everything. He didn't see Joseph as a father. He saw Joseph as a shadow. I walked to Charlie and knelt beside him, careful and gentle. Yes, I said. It was. Charlie swallowed. Is he coming here? I took Charlie's hands in mine. His fingers were warm. Real. Present. No, I said firmly. He is not. And if he ever tried, we have plans. We have people who help. We're safe. Charlie nodded slowly, but his eyes glistened with something tender and complicated fear mixed with curiosity, the way children try to make sense of adult chaos. Why does he want to see me now? He asked. I could have said 100 things. I could have blamed Mildred. I could have explained manipulation. I could have talked about regret and guilt and loneliness. But none of those things were Charlie's burden. So I told him the truth in a way his heart could hold. Sometimes people realize too late that they made a terrible mistake, I said gently. And they want to undo it. But wanting something doesn't mean you get it, especially when you hurt people. Charlie's lower lip trembled. Did I do something wrong? My chest tightened. No, I said immediately fiercely. Charlie, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. Not then. Not now. You are not the reason for any of this. Daniel knelt on Charlie's other side. You're amazing, he said simply. And you're safe. That's the only thing you need to carry. Charlie exhaled, and the sound was shaky, but he nodded. That night, after Charlie went to bed, Daniel and I sat in the kitchen with the lights dimmed, tea cooling in our cups. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you listen for danger even when there isn't any. Daniel spoke first. We report the call, he said. I nodded. We do. He reached for his laptop, already moving into action, but he stopped and looked at me first. Are you okay? He asked. I opened my mouth to say yes, the automatic word people say when they want the conversation to end. But the truth was more layered. I'm steady, I said finally. And angry. And tired. Daniel's eyes softened. That's allowed, he said. We reported the call. We updated our security settings. We informed the school. We tightened every lock, physical, digital, emotional. And then we went back to living. Because fear can be a thief if you let it stay. Days passed. Then weeks. Then months. Joseph did not appear. But the knowledge that he was out there, searching, lingered like a distant thundercloud. It didn't ruin every sunny day, but it reminded me to keep an umbrella nearby. Charlie, resilient as children often are, returned to his routines. He played soccer. He joked with friends. He stopped asking questions about Joseph after a while, not because he forgot, but because he didn't need to carry that story every day. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me with a seriousness that made him seem older than his years. "Mom?" he asked. "Yes. If he really wanted me," Charlie said slowly, "why didn't he want me when I was little?" The question was a needle straight through my heart. I sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed his hair back. "Because he was broken in a way that made him choose the wrong things," I said carefully. "And because he didn't know how to be brave." Charlie's eyes searched mine. "Was Dad brave?" he asked, meaning Daniel. Daniel, standing in the doorway, didn't move, but I saw his throat tighten. "Yes," I said, my voice thick. "Daniel is brave. Not loud brave. The kind of brave that shows up. Every day. Even when it's hard." Charlie nodded, as if that answer fit into place inside him. "Okay," he whispered. "I like that kind." I kissed his forehead and turned off the lamp. As I walked out, Daniel caught my hand in the hallway and squeezed it gently. "He's going to grow up good," Daniel said. I looked back at Charlie's closed door, the soft glow of the nightlight spilling under it like a promise. "He already is," I whispered. It would have been easy to end the story there, with the move, the safety, the steady warmth of a home that finally belonged to us. But life is rarely that tidy. Sometimes the past doesn't vanish. Sometimes it tries to bargain. A year after the phone call, a letter arrived. It was not addressed to me. It was addressed to Charlie. My hands trembled as I held it. The envelope was plain. The handwriting was careful, almost too careful, like someone trying to look calm on paper. No return address. Just one word in the corner, Dad. Daniel stood beside me at the counter, his jaw clenched. Joseph wasn't Dad, Daniel was. "We don't have to open it," he said quietly. Charlie came into the kitchen mid-sentence, backpack slung over one shoulder. He froze when he saw the envelope. "What's that?" he asked, voice cautious. I took a breath so slow it felt like swallowing calm. "It's a letter," I said. "From Joseph." Charlie stared at it like it might bite. Daniel spoke gently. "This is your choice," he told Charlie. "You don't owe him anything. But if you want to read it, we'll be here." Charlie's eyes flicked between us. Then he set his backpack down and stepped closer, his face tight with nerves. "Can you read it first?" he asked me softly. "Just to make sure it's not weird." My heart cracked a little, not because of Joseph, but because of the way Charlie had learned caution so young. "Of course," I said. I opened the envelope with a butter knife, slowly, as if speed might make the words more powerful. The letter inside was a single page. Joseph's handwriting filled it in uneven lines. He wrote about regret. He wrote about how he'd been controlled. He wrote about Mildred, about how she'd ruined everything. He wrote about how prison had changed him. He wrote about wanting to meet Charlie, even just once, even just to say sorry. There was no apology to me. Not really. There was an apology draped in excuses, like a coat thrown over something rotten. I read it twice, making sure I wasn't missing anything. Then I looked at Charlie. He was watching my face, not the paper, as if my expression would tell him everything he needed to know. "What does it say?" he asked. I folded the letter neatly, careful with my movements. "It says he's sorry," I said. "And he wants to meet you." Charlie swallowed. "Is he really sorry?" I thought of the phone call. "I know where you are." I thought of the way his need had always been bigger than our safety. "I think he's sorry for himself," I said gently. "And I think he wants relief. But I don't know if he understands what you needed." Charlie stared at the counter for a long moment, silent. Then he surprised me. He reached out and took the folded letter from my hand. He didn't open it. He just held it like he was weighing it. Finally, he said, "Can I write back?" Daniel's eyebrows lifted. "If you want," he said carefully. "But you don't have to." Charlie nodded. "I want to," he said. "But..." I don't want to meet him. My breath caught. Charlie looked up at me, eyes steady. I don't know him, he said. And I already have a dad. I just want him to stop. Tears burned behind my eyes. Daniel's voice was soft. Okay, he said. We can do that. That night, Charlie sat at the dining table with a piece of notebook paper, tongue sticking out slightly as he concentrated. I sat nearby, not writing for him, just being there, being the kind of witness a child deserves when he's doing something hard. Daniel made hot chocolate and set it beside Charlie like a silent show of support. Charlie wrote slowly, carefully. When he finished, he slid the paper toward me. Can you check spelling? He asked. I read it. It was short, honest, kind. He wrote, Joseph, I hope you're okay. I don't want to meet right now. Please stop trying to find us. I have a dad and a safe life. I want to keep it that way. Charlie. I covered my mouth with my hand, emotion rising fast and sudden. Daniel looked over my shoulder and exhaled softly. That's really mature, he murmured. Charlie shrugged, trying to look casual, but his eyes were glassy. I just want it to be over, he whispered. I pulled him into my arms and held him tightly. It will be, I said. We will make sure it is. We mailed Charlie's letter through a lawyer, not directly. We did everything through official channels, like adults building walls out of paper and law and calm. And then we waited. Weeks passed. No reply came. Months passed. Still nothing. The thundercloud in my mind began to drift farther away. One night, long after Charlie had fallen asleep, Daniel and I stood outside under a sky filled with stars. The air was cool and clean, and the world felt vast in a way that made human drama seem small. Daniel slipped his hand into mine. Do you ever think about how we got here? He asked. All the time, I admitted. Does it still hurt? He asked. I thought of the sidewalk in the rain. I thought of the locked door. I thought of Mildred's voice saying, of course he believed me. And then I thought of Charlie's letter, of his steady voice, of the way he had claimed his own boundaries. It hurts, I said softly, but it doesn't own me anymore. Daniel squeezed my hand. Good, he said, because you deserve a life that belongs to you. I leaned my head against his shoulder and closed my eyes. Inside the house, the quiet wasn't threatening. It was peaceful. It was the sound of safety. And for the first time in a long time, I believed fully that the ghosts really had lost the map to our door. The next year was almost quiet. Not perfect. Life never is. But quiet in the way a lake is quiet after the wind finally stops. Small ripples, soft movement, nothing crashing. Charlie grew taller. His voice dropped a little. He started caring about his hair in a way that made me laugh, because I could still picture him at 4 years old, wearing superhero pajamas backward, insisting it was more powerful that way. Daniel and I settled into ordinary joys. Weekend pancakes, late-night movies, school projects spread across the dining table like a paper explosion. I started planting herbs in a little raised garden box by the porch, basil, mint, rosemary, because growing something on purpose felt like a personal victory. And for a while, Joseph stayed gone. The lawyer called once every few months to say there was nothing new. No contact. No sightings. No legal filings. It was the kind of nothing I'd prayed for. Then, on a cloudy Thursday, the past found a new way to knock. It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a letter. It was a package. A medium-sized box appeared on our porch, neat and taped, with a shipping label that made my stomach flip the instant I saw it. No return address. Just a name in the sender line. M. Mercer. Daniel stood behind me as I stared at it through the window. You don't have to touch it, he said quietly. I know, I replied. But my hands were already cold. My instincts were already awake. Charlie came into the hallway and stopped short. What's that? He asked. I kept my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding. A package, I said. Charlie frowned. Did you order something? No, I said. Daniel's eyes narrowed. We'll handle it, he told Charlie. Go finish your homework. Charlie hesitated, looking from the box to our faces, reading the tension the way kids do. Is it from him? He asked softly. I didn't want to say Joseph's name out loud. Like, speaking it might make him more real. I don't know, I said. But we'll be careful. Daniel stepped onto the porch first, as if his body could block whatever might be waiting. He crouched, examined the tape, checked for anything odd, anything that made his careful mind go into protective mode. Then he lifted it with both hands, slow and deliberate, and carried it inside. We set it on the kitchen counter like it was a live thing. Our house was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Daniel slid a butter knife under the tape. I held my breath. When the box opened, there was no glitter bomb, no hidden camera, no loud surprise. There were only papers. A thick stack of them. And on top, like a formal invitation, was a letter printed on expensive-looking stationery. Daniel and I exchanged a look. He nodded once, and I unfolded it. The first line made my vision blur. Margaret Carter, you have been named in the estate of Mildred Mercer. Mildred Mercer. So that was her last name in full, the name that had hovered like a shadow in my life for years. My fingers tightened around the paper. Daniel leaned closer, reading over my shoulder. The letter went on in stiff legal language. It explained that Mildred had set aside assets, that she had created a small trust, that she had instructed her attorney to deliver documentation after a designated period. A designated period. As if she'd planned this like a final chess move. And then I saw the sentence that made me sit down hard in the kitchen chair. The trust is for Charlie Carter, to be released upon his 18th birthday, contingent upon a single meeting with the appointed executor. After the adoption, we changed Charlie's last name. I stared. Daniel's voice was flat. No, he said. I read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood. But it was the same. Money. Conditions. Control. Even dead, Mildred was trying to reach into our lives and touch the steering wheel. Charlie came into the kitchen, drawn by the silence. What is it? He asked. I folded the letter slowly, trying to decide how much truth his heart could hold in one moment. Daniel spoke first, steady and protective. It's paperwork, he said. Nothing for you to worry about. Charlie's eyes flicked to the letter in my hands. That's a grown-up lie, he said, not accusing, just stating. I swallowed. He was older now. He deserved more honesty than I had wanted to give. It's from your grandmother, I said carefully. Charlie's eyebrows knit. The one who lied, he asked. Yes, I said. Charlie's mouth tightened. Why is she sending stuff if she's gone? Daniel looked at me. I saw the question in his eyes. Do we tell him about the trust? Or do we shield him? Charlie didn't wait. Is it money? He asked. I exhaled slowly. Yes, I admitted. But it has a condition. Charlie blinked. Like, I have to do something. I nodded. They're saying you'd have to meet an executor. Someone handling her estate. Charlie's face went still. Is it Joseph? He asked. I didn't know. That was the worst part. I didn't know. Daniel's jaw tightened. We don't agree to anything, he said firmly. Not without legal advice. Not without safety. Charlie stared at the letter a moment longer, then surprised me again. He looked up at Daniel. Do we need it? He asked. Daniel softened his voice. Need what? The money, Charlie said simply. Daniel paused. No, he said. We don't need it. Charlie nodded slowly, as if that answer relieved something inside him. Then he looked at me. Then I don't want it, he said. The words were quiet, but they landed like a hammer, clean and final. My throat tightened. Charlie, I said softly, you don't have to decide right now. He shook his head. Yes, I do, he said. Because they're still trying. And I'm tired of them trying. Daniel reached for Charlie's shoulder, gentle. That's a strong boundary, he said. And it's yours to set. Charlie swallowed. They always acted like I was a prize, he said, voice trembling just slightly. Like I'm something they can use. I'm not. I stood and pulled him into my arms, holding him tightly. You're right, I whispered into his hair. You're not. That night, after Charlie went to bed, Daniel and I sat with our lawyer on speakerphone. We read through every page. We looked for traps. We asked questions until our voices went hoarse. The lawyer's tone was practical. This is unusual, she said. But not unheard of. It's a posthumous attempt at control. The executor meeting could be harmless, or it could be a loophole. A way for Joseph to get proximity. Daniel's voice hardened. We will not put Charlie near him. Then the lawyer said, we can respond formally, decline, or request modifications. But understand, she wrote this to force a choice. A choice. I stared at the printed words on the table, Mildred's last attempt to pull strings. Decline, I said. We decline. Daniel covered my hand with his. We decline, he echoed. The next day, our lawyers sent a letter, clear, formal, final. Charlie would not participate. All communication must remain through counsel. Do not contact the family. Do not attempt to locate them. A week passed. Then another. And then, like a wave receding, a reply came from the estate attorney. No threats. No bargaining. Just a short acknowledgement and one sentence that made my stomach twist. Please be advised that Joseph Mercer has contested your declination, citing paternal interest and financial obligation. Paternal interest. Financial obligation. Daniel read it and exhaled sharply. He's using the money as an excuse, he said. He's using anything, I replied. For the first time in a long time, I felt the old fear try to rise. But it didn't take over. It didn't flood me the way it used to. Because we weren't the same people anymore. We had plans. We had lawyers. We had distance. We had a son who knew his own worth. Still, the situation dragged on, slow and irritating, like sand in a shoe. Joseph's lawyer sent messages through channels. Our lawyer answered and blocked and refused. The estate attorney tried to mediate. We refused again. And then, one quiet evening, the phone rang. It was our lawyer. I have an update, she said. Joseph has agreed to withdraw his contest. My breath caught. Why? I asked, suspicious. There was a pause. Because the trust has another clause, she said. A clause he apparently did not anticipate. Daniel leaned closer, eyes narrowed. What clause? Our lawyer cleared her throat. If Charlie refuses the meeting, the trust converts into a donation, automatically split between two charities Mildred named. I blinked, stunned. Charities. Yes, the lawyer said. One is a family resource center. The other is a legal aid nonprofit for women and children leaving unsafe situations. I sat down slowly. Daniel stared at the wall, processing. So she couldn't control Charlie, he murmured. So she redirected the control. Or, I said quietly, she tried to look like a savior at the end. The lawyer's voice softened. Whatever her motive was, she said, the result is, Joseph loses leverage. He can't use the money to force contact. And he can't contest the donation without exposing himself legally again. I felt my shoulders drop, tension releasing. So it's over? I asked. As far as this, the lawyer said. Yes. When the call ended, Daniel and I sat in silence. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, the house was warm. Daniel finally spoke. How do you feel? He asked. I thought about Mildred. About how she'd build a cage around Joseph with love that wasn't really love, more like possession. I thought about how she'd tried to build a cage around me too. About how, even at the end, she couldn't resist one last attempt to orchestrate the story. And yet, because we refused to play our assigned roles, her final move ended up helping strangers instead. I feel free, I said, surprised by my own honesty. Not because she did anything right, but because she can't reach us anymore. Daniel nodded. And because Charlie chose himself, he said. That night, I told Charlie the update in simple terms. Not the legal language. Not the messy motives. Just the truth. The money is going to charities now, I said. And Joseph can't use it to bother us. Charlie looked thoughtful. So, people who need help will get it? He asked. Yes, I said. Charlie nodded slowly. That's better, he said. I studied his face, the calm certainty there, and I felt something loosen inside me that I didn't even realize I'd still been holding. Later, when I tucked him in, Charlie asked quietly, Do you think they ever loved me? The question landed softly, like a feather with weight. I sat on the edge of his bed and chose my words carefully. I think Joseph loved the idea of you, I said. But he didn't know how to love you the way you deserved. Charlie frowned. And her? I exhaled. I think Mildred loved control, I said gently. And sometimes people confuse control with love. Charlie was quiet for a moment. Then he whispered, "I'm glad we have real love." My eyes burned. "Me too," I whispered. "So glad." I turned off the light, leaving the night light on soft glow, steady glow. In the hallway, Daniel waited, hands in his pockets, watching me with that same quiet devotion that had rebuilt my life brick by brick. We went downstairs and stood in the kitchen, just like we always did, teacups in hand, the world calm around us. Daniel leaned his forehead against mine. "We kept him safe," he murmured. I closed my eyes. "We did," I said. And in the silence, in the ordinary hum of a house that finally belonged to us, I realized something important. The past can write letters. It can send packages. It can try to buy its way back in. But it cannot undo the life we built with truth. It cannot change the fact that Charlie grew up surrounded by steady, gentle love. It cannot touch us now because we learned the difference between a door and a boundary, and we chose the boundary every time. And that's how the story ends, not with revenge, not with drama, not with the past finally apologizing in a way that makes everything neat. It ends with peace, with a warm kitchen, with a sleeping child, with a home where love is real. If you made it to the end, take one small step for yourself. Tap like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can fall asleep to a new story every week. And before you go, comment peace if you're choosing calm over chaos tonight, and tell me where you're listening from so I can say goodnight in the next video.